Your things. You need to leave tonight." The words came from the doorway, not shouted, not apologetic, just said, like he was reading off a grocery list. Sloane stood at the stove, wooden spoon in hand, steam rising from the pot of beef stew she'd been stirring for the past hour. His favorite. The kind she made every Sunday when things were still good, when he still kissed her forehead in the morning, when he still called her my girl. She turned slowly. He wasn't alone. The woman standing beside him had her hand on his arm. Casual, possessive, like she'd been standing there 100 times before. Her name was Vivian. Sloane knew her. She'd met her at company dinners, smiled at her across conference tables, heard her name thrown around in conversations about business strategy and networking opportunities. Vivian wasn't looking at Sloane. She was looking at the house, at the marble countertops, at the framed photos on the wall, at the life she was about to step into. "You heard me," Marcus said. His voice was flat, empty. "I need you gone by morning." Sloane's hands didn't shake, not yet. She set the spoon down slowly, turned off the burner, and wiped her palms on the dish towel hanging from the oven handle. "What about the twins?" she asked. Her voice was steady, calm, like she was asking about the weather. Marcus shifted his weight. For a second, just a second, something flickered across his face. But it was gone before she could name it. "They cry too much," he said. "I can't think. Can't work. Vivian and I, we need space. We need to build something real." Sloane blinked. Real. She looked at Vivian. Vivian looked back. And in that moment, Sloane understood. This wasn't an affair. This wasn't a mistake. This was a transaction, a calculated decision. A man who believed he had outgrown the woman who built the floor he stood on. "You've been useless since they were born," Marcus continued. His tone was casual now, like he was explaining why he didn't like a restaurant anymore. "You don't contribute. You don't add value. I need someone who understands success, someone who fits the life I'm building." He paused. "I want a trophy wife now." The twins started crying upstairs. 2 months old. Too young to understand that the man who was supposed to protect them had just decided they were inconvenient. Sloane didn't move, didn't argue, didn't beg. She just nodded. And in that nod, something shifted, something cold, something patient. Because Marcus had no idea what he'd just done. He thought he was ending a marriage. What he was really doing was stepping off a cliff. And the fall? That was going to be slow. If you think you know where this is going, you don't. Drop a comment with the first word that comes to mind when you hear the phrase, quiet revenge. Sloane Mercer didn't grow up with money. She grew up in a 2-bedroom apartment in Tacoma, Washington, where the walls were so thin you could hear the neighbors fighting at 3 in the morning. Her mom worked 2 jobs, one at a call center during the day, one cleaning office buildings at night. Her dad left when she was 7, didn't say goodbye, didn't leave a note, just took the car and never came back. By the time Sloane was 10, she understood something most kids don't learn until they're much older. The world doesn't care about fairness. It doesn't care about effort. It only cares about results. So she got results. Straight A's, scholarships, a full ride to the University of Washington. She studied finance because finance was power. She studied systems because systems were how people stayed broke or got free. And she studied people because people, she learned, were the easiest thing to manipulate if you knew what they wanted. By 25, she was working at a mid-sized investment firm in Seattle. By 27, she was managing portfolios for clients who made more in a month than her mom made in 5 years. By 29, she was being courted by larger firms. Offers came in, big ones, the kind that came with corner offices and executive perks. But there was a problem. Men didn't like her success. Not in the way you'd think. They liked it at first. They liked the idea of dating a woman who was smart, ambitious, driven, but once they realized she made more than them, once they saw her name on the lease, her card paying for dinner, her calendar filled with meetings they couldn't access, they left. Every single one. They called it intimidation. They called it not being ready. They called it a dozen different things that all meant the same thing. I can't handle you being better than me. So when she met Marcus Hale at a networking event in downtown Seattle, she made a decision. She would be smaller, not weak, not stupid, just quieter. She let him talk. She let him lead. She let him believe he was the one with the plan, the vision, the future. And when he talked about wanting to build something real, she nodded and smiled and said, "I believe in you." What she didn't say was that she was already building it for him. Marcus worked in logistics, mid-level, decent salary, no real upward trajectory. He talked about wanting more but didn't know how to get there. So Sloane got it for him. She introduced him to the right people. Quietly, casually. A mention here, a referral there. She made sure his resume ended up in front of hiring managers who owed her favors. She made sure his name came up in conversations about rising talent. Within 6 months, Marcus had a new job, better title, better pay. He thought it was because he'd finally been seen. Sloane didn't correct him. When they got married 2 years later, Marcus believed he was the provider, the builder, the man carrying the future. He bought the house, though Sloane co-signed and contributed more to the down payment than he ever knew. He talked about investments, though Sloane was the one who structured them, chose them, protected them. He bragged about his career, though Sloane was the one who opened every door he walked through. She let him believe it was all him, because that's what kept him. And for a while it worked. They were happy, or at least they looked happy. Marcus was confident. Sloane was content. The life they built felt stable, solid, safe. Then she got pregnant. Twins. Marcus was excited at first. He talked about being a father, about legacy, about raising kids who would understand what it means to work hard. But as her belly grew, something else grew too. Distance. He stayed late at the office. He took calls in the other room. He stopped asking how she felt, stopped touching her stomach, stopped looking at her the way he used to. By the time the twins were born, Marcus was already gone. Not physically, not yet, but emotionally, he'd checked out months ago. Sloane told herself it was stress, new job responsibilities, the pressure of being a father. She told herself he'd come back once things settled. She was wrong. Because Marcus hadn't just checked out, he'd checked in somewhere else, with Vivian. Sloane found out 3 weeks after the twins were born, not because Marcus confessed, not because someone told her, but because she saw a text notification light up his phone while he was in the shower. "Can't wait to see you tonight. Wear that dress I like." She didn't confront him, didn't cry, didn't scream. She just memorized the number, and then she went back to feeding the babies. Because Sloane understood something Marcus didn't. Anger is loud, revenge is silent, and she had time. The night Marcus told her to leave, Sloane packed 2 bags, one for her, one for the twins. She didn't take much, didn't need to. She left the jewelry he'd given her on the dresser, left the photos on the wall, left everything that looked like proof she'd ever been there. Vivian watched from the doorway as Sloane carried the twins down the stairs. She didn't say anything, didn't offer to help, just stood there, smiling. Marcus was in the living room on his phone, didn't look up, didn't say goodbye. Sloane walked out the front door and into the cold Seattle night. It was November, raining. The kind of rain that soaks through your coat in seconds. The twins were wrapped in blankets, but they were already fussing, hungry, tired, confused. She put them in the back seat of her car, a 10-year-old Honda Civic she'd kept even after Marcus bought his Tesla, and sat in the driver's seat for a long time. She didn't cry. She didn't call anyone. She just sat there, listening to the rain, listening to the twins, listening to the sound of her own breathing. And then she started the car. She drove to a motel on the outskirts of the city, the kind with flickering neon signs and rates by the hour, the kind where no one asks questions. She paid cash for a week, carried the twins inside, fed them, changed them, laid them down in the middle of the bed, and built a wall of pillows around them so they wouldn't roll off. Then she sat on the floor, back against the wall, knees pulled to her chest, and for the first time in years she let herself think. Not about Marcus, not about Vivian, not about the house or the life or the betrayal, about what came next. Because the thing about Sloane was this: she'd spent her entire life being underestimated, by teachers who thought she was too quiet, by bosses who thought she was too soft, by men who thought she was too dependent. But underestimation, that was her advantage. People didn't see her coming. And Marcus? He had no idea what he'd just set in motion. The first week was the hardest. Not emotionally. Emotionally, Sloane was numb. But logistically, that was a nightmare. 2-month-old twins don't care about your plans. They don't care that you're in a motel room with no crib, no changing table, no routine. They just cry, and cry, and cry. Sloane fed them every 3 hours, changed them every 2, slept in 20-minute intervals when they slept. She lived on vending machine snacks and gas station coffee. She didn't shower for 4 days, didn't check her phone, didn't think about anything except keeping the babies alive. On the 5th day, her phone buzzed, a text from her mom. Heard what happened. You okay? Sloane stared at the message for a long time. She didn't know how her mom had found out, didn't know who told her, didn't care. She typed back, I'm fine. Her mom called immediately. Sloane didn't answer. Because the truth was she wasn't fine, but she also wasn't broken. And the last thing she needed was someone trying to fix her. On the 7th day, Sloane moved out of the motel, not because she wanted to, because she had to. A week was all she'd paid for, and she didn't have the money to extend. She drove to a friend's place, a woman named Kira she'd worked with years ago. They weren't close, hadn't talked in months, but Kira had always been the type to say yes before asking why. Sloane knocked on the door at 9 p.m., babies on her hips. Kira opened the door, took one look at Sloane, at the twins, at the bags. How long do you need? She asked. 2 weeks, Sloane said. Maybe 3. Kira stepped aside. Stay as long as you need. Sloane slept on Kira's couch for 3 weeks. Kira worked during the day, so Sloane had the apartment to herself. She kept the twins quiet, kept the space clean, kept herself invisible. At night after Kira went to bed, Sloane sat in the dark with her laptop, and she started planning. Because here's what Marcus didn't know. The house he lived in, Sloane's name was on the deed, not as a co-owner, as the primary owner. She'd structured it that way when they bought it, told Marcus it was better for taxes. He'd signed without reading. The job he loved, Sloane had gotten him that job. She'd made one phone call to a senior director at the company, a man she'd done consulting work for years ago, a man who owed her. She'd asked him to interview Marcus, to give him a shot, to make him feel like he'd earned it. The promotion Marcus got 6 months ago, that was Sloane, too. She'd recommended him during a conversation with the VP, casually. He's got potential, just needs the right opportunity. The VP had listened. And Marcus? He thought it was because he'd impressed them during a presentation. But the most important thing Marcus didn't know, the company he worked for, the one he bragged about, the one he called his future, was partially owned by a private equity firm, a firm Sloane had consulted for, a firm where she still had connections, a firm where one phone call could change everything. Sloane didn't make that call right away. She waited. Because revenge isn't about speed, it's about timing. While Sloane was sleeping on Kira's couch, Marcus was living his best life. He posted photos on social media, him and Vivian at expensive restaurants, him and Vivian at charity galas, him and Vivian on weekend trips to wine country. In every photo, he looked happy, confident, free. Vivian looked the part, too. Designer everything. Perfect hair, perfect smile. The kind of woman men look at and think, I made it. Marcus's friends congratulated him. His colleagues admired him. His family, what little he had, didn't ask questions. To everyone watching, Marcus Hale was winning. But winning is funny. It's loud. It's visible. It's the kind of thing people notice. Losing? That's quiet. And Marcus had no idea he was already losing. Because while he was posting photos and buying bottles of champagne he couldn't afford, Sloane was making calls. Not to Marcus, not to Vivian, not to anyone who would tell them what was coming. She called lawyers, accountants, old colleagues, people who understood how systems worked, people who knew how to move pieces on a board Marcus didn't even know he was playing on. She asked questions, took notes, built a map, and slowly, so slowly Marcus wouldn't notice, she started pulling threads. The first thread was the house. Sloane's name was on the deed, but Marcus had been making the mortgage payments, or at least he thought he had. What he didn't realize was that the account the payments came from, that was a joint account, one Sloane had access to. She didn't drain it, didn't take anything, she just stopped contributing. Marcus didn't notice at first. He had money. His salary was good, he could cover it. But then Vivian moved in. And Vivian had expensive taste, new furniture, new decor, a refresh of the living room, a redesign of the kitchen. She hired an interior decorator, bought artwork, subscribed to meal delivery services that cost more per week than most people spent on groceries in a month. Marcus paid for it, all of it, because that's what men do when they're trying to prove something. And slowly, so slowly he didn't see it, his savings started to shrink. The second thread was the job. Marcus's position at the company was solid, but solid isn't the same as secure. He had a boss. That boss had a boss. And that boss? He answered to the private equity firm. Sloane didn't call them directly. She didn't need to. She just reached out to an old contact, a woman named Darcy who worked in acquisitions. They'd collaborated on a deal 3 years ago, stayed in touch, exchanged emails every few months. Sloane sent her a message. Hey, Darcy. Hope you're well. Quick question. Do you still work with company name? Heard they're restructuring. Curious if you know anything about upcoming changes? Darcy wrote back the same day. Yeah, we're tightening operations, cutting redundancies. Why? You interested in consulting? Sloane smiled. Maybe. Who's leading the restructure? Darcy gave her a name. Sloane wrote it down. The third thread was Vivian. Vivian thought she'd won. She thought she'd taken Sloane's life, her house, her man, her future. What she didn't realize was that the life she'd taken was built on a foundation she didn't understand. Vivian wasn't stupid. She was smart, ambitious, the kind of woman who knew how to network, how to leverage relationships, how to climb. But she'd made one mistake. She'd assumed Marcus was the architect. And architects don't lose their buildings. But Marcus wasn't the architect. Sloane was. And architects, they can always rebuild, or they can watch the structure collapse. 3 months after Sloane left, Marcus got a letter. It came in the mail, plain white envelope, no return address. He opened it at the kitchen table while Vivian was upstairs getting ready for a gala. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Notice of ownership claim. Marcus read it twice, then 3 times. Then he called his lawyer. What the hell is this? He asked. The lawyer sighed. It's exactly what it looks like. Your ex-wife is claiming ownership of the property. Her name is on the deed. You've been living there, but legally it's hers. That's not possible, Marcus said. I bought that house. Did you? The lawyer asked. Because according to the records, her name is listed as the primary owner. You're listed as a co-signer, which means she has legal authority to reclaim it. Marcus's hand tightened around the phone. Can she do that? Just kick me out? If she wants to, yeah. She can file for eviction, or she can offer to buy you out, or she can sell the house entirely. It's her call. Marcus hung up. Vivian came downstairs 20 minutes later. She was wearing a black dress. Expensive. The kind Marcus had paid for. "You ready?" she asked. Marcus didn't answer. He was staring at the letter. Vivian frowned. "What's wrong?" "We need to talk," Marcus said. And for the first time since he'd kicked Sloane out, Marcus felt something he hadn't felt in months: fear. The gala that night was a disaster. Marcus couldn't focus, couldn't smile, couldn't pretend everything was fine. Vivian noticed. She kept asking what was wrong. He kept saying nothing, but his hands were shaking. His jaw was tight. He kept checking his phone. By the time they got home, Vivian was furious. "You embarrassed me tonight," she said. "You stood there like a ghost. Didn't talk to anyone. Didn't network. What the hell is going on?" Marcus poured himself a drink. "Sloane's trying to take the house." Vivian blinked. "What?" "The house. It's in her name. Legally, she owns it. She can kick us out whenever she wants." Vivian's expression shifted, from anger to confusion to something else, something colder. "You didn't tell me that." "I didn't know," Marcus said. "I thought—" "You thought what? That you owned it? That you built this?" Vivian's voice was sharp now, cutting. "Jesus, Marcus. How do you not know who owns your own house? It's complicated." "No," Vivian said. "It's not. It's your name or it's not, and apparently it's not." She grabbed her purse. "Where are you going?" Marcus asked. "Out." "Vivian, I need to think," she said. "I need to figure out if I'm standing on solid ground or if you've been lying to me this whole time." She left. Marcus stood in the kitchen, alone, staring at the marble countertops, the custom cabinets, the life he thought he'd built. And for the first time, he wondered if any of it had ever been his. The next morning, Marcus called Sloane. She didn't answer. He called again. No answer. He texted. "We need to talk. About the house. About everything. Please." 3 hours later, she replied. "Send your lawyer. I'll send mine." That was it. No emotion, no anger, no room for negotiation, just business. Marcus sat on the couch, head in his hands. And for the first time since he'd kicked her out, he realized what he'd done. He hadn't just ended a marriage. He'd dismantled the only thing holding his life together, and now it was falling apart. While Marcus was spiraling, Sloane was building. She'd moved out of Kira's apartment 2 weeks earlier, found a small rental in a quieter part of Seattle. 1 bedroom, barely enough space for her and the twins, but it was hers, and it was enough. She'd also started working again. Not full-time, not yet. But she'd reached out to a few old clients, offered consulting services, financial planning, portfolio management, the kind of work she could do from home, the kind of work that didn't require an office or a title. The clients said yes, because Sloane was good. She'd always been good. And the people who knew her, they hadn't forgotten. Within 2 months, she had 5 clients. Within 4 months, she had 12. Within 6 months, she was making more than she'd made at her old firm. And she was doing it on her own terms. No boss, no office politics, no pretending to be smaller than she was. Just results. The twins were 6 months old now, still exhausting, still demanding. But Sloane had a routine. She worked during their naps, worked after they went to bed, worked in the early mornings before they woke up. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't easy, but it was hers. And for the first time in years, Sloane felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: control. Marcus, meanwhile, was losing it. The house situation was getting worse. Sloane's lawyer had filed paperwork, legal paperwork, the kind that came with deadlines and consequences. Marcus had 30 days to either buy her out or vacate the property. He didn't have the money to buy her out. His savings were gone, drained by Vivian's spending, by the lifestyle he'd been trying to maintain, by the image he'd been trying to project. He tried to get a loan, got denied. His credit wasn't bad, but it wasn't good enough. Not for the amount he needed. He tried to negotiate with Sloan. Her lawyer shut him down. "My client has no interest in negotiation. The property is hers. You have 30 days. He tried to talk to Vivian. She wasn't interested. "I didn't sign up for this," she said. "I signed up for success, for stability, for a man who had his life together." "I do have my life together," Marcus said. Vivian looked around the house, at the furniture she'd bought, at the life she'd designed. "Do you?" she asked. Then she left. Not for the night. For good. She packed her things, took her car, didn't leave a note, just like Marcus's dad. Marcus sat in the empty house, alone, surrounded by furniture that didn't belong to him, in a house that didn't belong to him, living a life that had never belonged to him, and he finally understood. He hadn't built anything. He'd just been living in someone else's design. The 30th day came fast. Marcus packed his things. Not much. Clothes, laptop, a few personal items. Everything else, the furniture, the art, the life, he left behind. Sloan didn't come to the house. Didn't need to. Her lawyer handled everything. The locks were changed. The property was secured, clean, professional, no drama. Marcus moved into a one-bedroom apartment across town. The kind with thin walls and flickering lights. The kind he used to look down on. He tried to keep his job, tried to stay focused. But the restructuring Sloan had heard about? It was happening. The private equity firm was cutting costs, eliminating redundancies, and Marcus, despite his title, despite his confidence, was redundant. He got the call on a Wednesday. "We're letting you go, effective immediately. You'll receive 2 weeks severance. HR will be in touch." Marcus sat in his car in the parking lot, staring at the building, at the job he thought he'd earned, at the future he thought he'd secured. Gone. All of it. He thought about calling Sloan, thought about apologizing, thought about explaining. But what would he say? That he was sorry? That he'd made a mistake? That he wanted her back? None of it would change anything. Because Sloan wasn't the type to forgive. She was the type to move on. And she had. 1 year after Marcus kicked her out, Sloan wasn't just surviving. She was thriving. Her consulting business had grown. She had 20 clients now, good clients, the kind who paid well and referred others. She'd hired an assistant, rented a small office space, built something real. The twins were walking now, talking, learning, growing. Sloan had enrolled them in a good daycare, the kind with clean floors and patient teachers, the kind she could afford now. She'd also bought a house, not the one Marcus had lived in, a new one, smaller. But it was hers, fully, completely. No co-signers, no complications, just hers. She didn't post about it on social media, didn't brag, didn't need to. Because success, she'd learned, didn't need an audience. It just needed to exist. Marcus, meanwhile, was still trying to find his footing. He'd gotten a new job, not as good as the old one, not as prestigious, but it paid the bills. Barely. He'd stopped posting on social media, stopped going to events, stopped pretending. He lived alone, worked alone, ate alone. Vivian had moved on, found someone new, someone with a better title, a bigger house, a more secure future. She didn't think about Marcus anymore. No one did, except Sloan. Not because she missed him, not because she wanted him back, but because she wanted him to see. 2 years after the betrayal, Sloan got a call. It was from Darcy, the woman from the private equity firm. "Hey," Darcy said, "I know this is random, but we're hosting a gala next month. Big donor event. I thought you might want to come. Network. Maybe pick up some new clients." Sloan hesitated. She didn't love events, didn't love crowds, but she also understood the value of visibility. "Who's going to be there?" she asked. Darcy rattled off names, executives, investors, people Sloan knew, people who could be useful. And then Darcy said one more name. Marcus Hale. Sloane's hand tightened around the phone. He's still with the company? She asked. Not the one you're thinking of, Darcy said. He works for one of our portfolio companies now, lower level. But he's invited. He'll probably be there. Sloane smiled. Send me the details. The gala was held at a hotel in downtown Seattle. Black tie, expensive. The kind of event where people measured success by the watch on your wrist and the person on your arm. Sloane arrived alone. She didn't need a date, didn't need validation. She wore a simple black dress, no jewelry, no fuss, just clean, confident, present. She walked into the ballroom and immediately felt the shift. People noticed her, not because she was loud, not because she was trying, but because there was something about her now. Something grounded, something earned. She found Darcy near the bar. They talked, laughed. Darcy introduced her to a few people, investors, founders, people who mattered. And then Sloane saw him. Marcus. He was standing near the back of the room, alone. Holding a drink he wasn't drinking. He looked smaller than she remembered, tired, worn down. He was scanning the room, looking for someone, anyone, trying to network, trying to matter. His eyes landed on Sloane. He froze. She didn't. She turned back to her conversation, smiled, laughed at something Darcy said. Let Marcus watch. Let him see what she'd become. Let him understand what he'd lost. 10 minutes later, Marcus approached. Sloane. His voice was quiet, tentative, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he spoke too loud. She turned. Marcus. Her voice was calm, neutral, not warm, not cold, just factual. I didn't know you'd be here, he said. Why would you? She replied. He shifted his weight, looked down, looked back up. You look good. Thanks. Silence. Marcus swallowed. I heard you started your own business. I did. That's great. Really, I'm happy for you. Sloane tilted her head. Are you? Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I wanted to... He stopped, took a breath. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For everything. For what I did. For how I did it. I was an idiot. I was wrong. And I... Marcus, Sloane interrupted. He stopped. She looked at him. Really looked at him. At the man who had once made her feel small. At the man who had thrown her out. At the man who had believed his own lie. I don't need your apology, she said. I know, but I need to give it. Sloane smiled. Not warmly, not cruelly, just honestly. Then give it to yourself, she said, because I've already moved on. She turned back to her conversation. Marcus stood there for a moment, waiting for more, waiting for her to turn back, waiting for something. But Sloane didn't turn back, and after a minute, Marcus walked away. Sloane's business had grown into something she'd never imagined 3 years after the incident. She had 40 clients now, a team of 3, an office with her name on the door. She'd been featured in a local business magazine, been invited to speak at conferences, been recognized as one of the top financial consultants in the Pacific Northwest. The twins were 3, healthy, happy, smart. Sloane had built a life, not the life she'd planned, not the life she'd expected, but a good life, a real life. She didn't think about Marcus anymore, didn't check his social media, didn't wonder what he was doing, because it didn't matter. He was a chapter, a lesson, a reminder. But he wasn't her story. She was, and her story, it was just getting started. Marcus, meanwhile, had learned something too. He'd learned that confidence without foundation is just noise, that power without ownership is just performance, that winning without earning is just luck. And luck runs out. He'd tried to rebuild, tried to network, tried to climb. But every door he knocked on had already been opened by someone else. Every opportunity he chased had already been claimed. Every connection he made had already been made by someone smarter, someone harder working, someone who didn't need to take credit for things they didn't build. He wasn't broke. He wasn't homeless. But he also wasn't thriving. He was just existing. And maybe that was the point. Because some people are builders, and some people are just tenants. Marcus had spent his whole life thinking he was the first. Sloane had spent her whole life proving she was. 5 years after the betrayal, Sloane stood in her office, looking out the window, watching the rain. The twins were in school now, kindergarten. They loved it. Made friends. Drew pictures. Came home every day with stories. Sloane's business had expanded again. She'd opened a second location, hired more staff, started offering workshops, teaching other people, especially women, how to build wealth, how to protect themselves, how to never be dependent on someone else's decisions. She didn't do it for revenge. She did it because she remembered what it felt like to stand in a motel room with 2 babies and no plan. And she didn't want anyone else to feel that way. She'd also started dating again. Nothing serious, just coffee, dinner, conversations with people who saw her as she was, not smaller, not quieter, just her. It felt good, not perfect, not healed, but good. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Is this Sloane Mercer?" She frowned. "Who's asking?" "My name is Ethan Cole. I'm a reporter with Seattle Business Journal. I'm writing a piece on women entrepreneurs in the Pacific Northwest. Your name came up several times. I'd love to interview you." Sloane stared at the message. Then she smiled. "Sure, let's talk." The interview ran 2 weeks later. Front page of the business section. A full feature, photos, quotes. Her story. Not the story of betrayal, not the story of Marcus, not the story of being kicked out. The story of building something from nothing, of refusing to quit, of turning pain into power. The story of a woman who bet on herself and won. Marcus saw the article. A colleague showed it to him at lunch, passed him the paper across the table with a knowing look. "Isn't this your ex-wife?" the colleague asked. Marcus took the paper, looked at the photo. Sloane was standing in her office, confident, smiling. The headline read, "From rock bottom to the top, how Sloane Mercer built a financial empire on her own terms." He read the article slowly. Every word, every quote, every detail about her journey. She didn't mention him, not once, not by name, not by implication. She talked about obstacles, about setbacks, about moments when everything fell apart. But she didn't talk about him, because to her he wasn't important enough to mention. He was just another obstacle, one she'd already overcome. Marcus folded the paper, handed it back. "Yeah," he said. "That's her." The colleague waited for more. An explanation, a story, some context. Marcus didn't give it. He just went back to his lunch. Because what could he say? That he'd had everything and thrown it away? That he'd been handed a foundation and called it his own? That he'd mistaken someone's love for weakness? None of it would sound right. None of it would make him look better. So he said nothing. And for the rest of the day, he thought about the woman in the photo. The woman he'd told to leave. The woman he'd called useless. The woman who had quietly built an empire while he was busy pretending to be a king. If you've made it this far, do me a favor. Hit that like button. Not for me. For every person who's ever been underestimated, who's ever been told they weren't enough, who's ever had to rebuild from nothing. This story isn't just entertainment, it's a reminder, and reminders need to spread. 6 years after the betrayal, Sloane received an invitation. It came in the mail, embossed letterhead, formal language. "You are cordially invited to speak at the annual Women in Business Leadership Summit." Sloane stared at the invitation. She'd been to events like this before, spoken at smaller conferences, led workshops. But this was different. This was national, televised, the kind of platform that reached thousands. She accepted. The event was held in Chicago. 3-day conference, keynote speakers, panel discussions, networking sessions. Sloane flew out alone. The twins stayed with her mom. They were 6 now. Old enough to understand that Mom had to work sometimes. Old enough to be proud when she told them she was speaking at a big event. "Are you going to be on TV?" her daughter asked. "Maybe," Sloane said. "Can we watch?" "Absolutely." The conference was massive. Hundreds of women, business owners, executives, founders, investors, women who had built things, women who had fought for things, women who had earned their place at the table. Sloane's keynote was on the second day. She walked onto the stage in front of 1,200 people. The lights were bright. The room was silent. She took a breath, and then she spoke. She didn't read from notes, didn't use a script. She just told her story. Not all of it. Not the details about Marcus or Vivian or the betrayal, but the parts that mattered. She talked about being kicked out with 2 babies and nowhere to go, about sleeping on a friend's couch, about starting a business from a 1-bedroom apartment, about the nights when she didn't know if she'd make rent, about the mornings when she woke up exhausted but got up anyway because quitting wasn't an option. She talked about being underestimated, about being told she didn't contribute, about being made to feel small, and she talked about the decision she made that night in the motel room. "I could have been angry," she said. "I could have been bitter. I could have spent years obsessing over the person who hurt me. But anger is heavy, and I was already carrying enough." She paused. "So I chose something else. I chose to build, not to prove anything to him, not to get revenge, but to prove something to myself, that I didn't need anyone's permission to succeed, that I didn't need validation, that I could stand on my own 2 feet and build something that mattered." The room was silent. "And here's what I learned," Sloane continued. "People will underestimate you. They'll doubt you. They'll tell you you're not enough. But their opinion doesn't define your worth. Your work does. Your discipline does. Your refusal to quit does." She looked out at the audience. "So if you're in that place right now, if you've been knocked down, kicked out, told you don't matter, I want you to hear this. You do matter. And the life you're capable of building is bigger than the person who tried to break you." The applause started slowly. Then it built. Then it roared. 1,200 women stood, clapping, some crying, some nodding, all understanding. Because every woman in that room had a story, and Sloane had just told theirs. Backstage, after the keynote, Sloane was surrounded. Women wanting to thank her, wanting to share their stories, wanting advice. She listened to all of them, every single one. A young woman in her 20s told Sloane she'd just left an abusive relationship and didn't know where to start. Sloane gave her a card. "Email me, I'll help." An older woman in her 50s told Sloane she'd been laid off after 30 years and was terrified to start over. Sloane squeezed her hand. "You're not starting over. You're starting better." A woman in her 40s told Sloane she'd been told by her ex-husband that she'd never succeed without him. Sloane smiled. "Did you prove him wrong yet?" The woman laughed. "Working on it." "Good," Sloane said. "Keep going." 3 hours later, Sloane sat in her hotel room, alone, exhausted, but satisfied. Her phone buzzed, a message from her mom. "We watched. The girls cried. I cried. You were incredible. So proud of you." Sloane smiled. She looked out the window at the Chicago skyline, at the lights, at the city that never stopped moving, and she thought about the woman she used to be, the woman who made herself smaller, the woman who hid her success, the woman who let someone else take credit for her work. That woman was gone, and the woman who replaced her, she was just getting started. 7 years after the betrayal, Sloane was invited to consult for the private equity firm Darcy worked for, the same firm that had restructured Marcus's old company, the same firm that had indirectly ended his career. Sloane didn't take the meeting out of spite. She took it because it was a good opportunity, a 6-month contract, high pay, flexible hours, the kind of work that would set her up for years. She flew to their headquarters in Boston, met with the partners, presented her approach, answered their questions. They hired her on the spot. When can you start? One of the partners asked. Next week, Sloane said. She started the following Monday. The work was complex, analyzing portfolios, identifying inefficiencies, recommending restructures. It was the kind of work Sloane loved, strategic, high stakes, impactful. 3 weeks into the contract, she was reviewing a list of underperforming companies the firm was considering divesting from. One name caught her eye, the company Marcus worked for. Sloane stared at the name, at the financials, at the projections. The company was hemorrhaging money, poor leadership, bad decisions, no vision. It was going under. And Marcus? He was still there. Sloane could have said nothing, could have let the firm make the decision on their own, could have stayed silent, but she didn't. She flagged the company, recommended they cut ties, provided data, analysis, proof. The firm agreed. 2 weeks later, the company was sold, liquidated. Employees were let go, Marcus included. Sloane didn't feel guilty. She didn't feel victorious either. She just felt nothing. Because Marcus had stopped being relevant to her story a long time ago. He was just a name on a spreadsheet now, and spreadsheets don't lie. 8 years after the betrayal, Sloane's twins were 8 years old. They were smart, curious, kind, everything she'd hoped they'd be. They asked about their father sometimes, not often, but sometimes. "Where is he?" her son asked one night at dinner. Sloane set down her fork. "He's around," she said. "He lives in the city." "Does he want to see us?" Sloane hesitated. The truth was, Marcus had reached out a few times over the years. Emails, texts, awkward, guilt-soaked messages asking if he could see the kids, asking if they could talk, asking if there was any way to fix things. Sloane had ignored most of them, not out of cruelty, out of protection, because Marcus had proven who he was, and she wasn't going to let him hurt her kids the way he'd hurt her. "I don't know," Sloane said honestly. "But I do know this. You have me, you have Grandma, you have a home, you have everything you need. And if he ever decides he wants to be part of your life, we'll talk about it then, okay?" Her son nodded. Okay. They finished dinner, did homework, went to bed, and Sloane sat on the couch in the quiet house she'd built. She thought about Marcus, about where he was, about whether he ever thought about them. She hoped he did, not because she wanted him to suffer, but because she wanted him to understand. That family isn't about convenience. It's about commitment, and he'd chosen convenience. So he lost the commitment. 9 years after the betrayal, Sloane's business hit a milestone, $10 million in annual revenue. She didn't throw a party, didn't post about it, didn't celebrate publicly. She just took her team out to dinner, thanked them, told them how much their work mattered, and then she went home, tucked the twins into bed, read them a story, kissed their foreheads, and sat in the dark living room, staring at the life she'd built. It wasn't the life she'd planned, but it was better, because it was real, and it was hers. 10 years after the betrayal, Sloane received a letter. It came in the mail, handwritten, no return address. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single page, Marcus's handwriting. "Sloane, I know you don't owe me anything. I know I don't deserve your time or your attention. But I need you to know something. I was wrong. About everything. I thought I was the one building our life. I thought I was the one holding everything together. I thought I was the provider, the leader, the one who mattered. But I wasn't. You were. And I didn't see it until it was too late. I've spent the last 10 years trying to rebuild, trying to find my footing, trying to become the man I thought I was. But the truth is, I was never that man. You were always stronger, smarter, more capable, and I was too insecure to admit it. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect a response. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see you, and I'm sorry. Marcus." Sloane read the letter twice. Then she folded it, put it back in the envelope, and set it on the table. She didn't respond. Not because she was angry, but because there was nothing left to say. Marcus had apologized, and that was enough. But it didn't change anything. She had moved on, and he would have to do the same. 11 years after the betrayal, Sloane stood in her office, looking at a framed photo on her desk. Her and the twins, taken last summer. They were at the beach, smiling, laughing, happy. She picked up the photo, ran her thumb over the glass. This was what mattered. Not the business, not the money, not the recognition. This, her kids, her life, her peace. She'd built something that couldn't be taken away, something that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. Something real. Her assistant knocked on the door. "Sloane, your 3 o'clock is here." Sloane set the photo down. "Send them in." She turned toward the door, ready, focused, present, because this was her life now, not defined by what she'd lost, but by what she'd built. 12 years after the betrayal, Sloane received an invitation to speak at a TED conference. She almost said no. She'd done enough speaking, enough traveling, enough sharing. But then she read the theme. Building after betrayal, how pain becomes power. She accepted. The talk was filmed in front of 2,000 people. It was 18 minutes long. She spoke about resilience, about rebuilding, about the quiet strength it takes to start over when everything has been taken from you. She spoke about the night Marcus kicked her out, about the motel, about the fear, about the choice she made to keep moving forward, and she spoke about what came after, not revenge, not bitterness, just work, discipline, belief. Betrayal doesn't define you, she said. What you do after does. The talk went viral. 5 million views in the first week, 10 million in the first month. Comments flooded in, messages, emails, people from all over the world telling her their stories, thanking her, saying she'd given them hope. Sloane read every single one, and she responded to as many as she could, because she remembered what it felt like to be alone, to feel forgotten, to wonder if anyone cared, and she wanted people to know. Someone does. 13 years after the betrayal, Marcus died. Not dramatically, not tragically, just quietly. Heart attack, at home, alone. Sloane found out through a mutual acquaintance, someone who thought she should know. She didn't go to the funeral, not out of spite, not out of hatred, but because she'd already said goodbye, a long time ago. She did, however, tell the twins. They were 13 now, old enough to understand, old enough to process. "Your father passed away," she said gently. They were quiet for a moment. "Did he ever want to see us?" her daughter asked. "I think he did," Sloane said, "but he didn't know how." Her son nodded. "Are you sad?" he asked. Sloane thought about it. "No," she said honestly, "but I'm not happy either. I just feel nothing, and that's okay." They hugged her, told her they loved her, and then they went back to their homework. Because life doesn't stop for grief. It just keeps moving. 14 years after the betrayal, Sloane stood on stage at another conference. This time, she wasn't the speaker. She was presenting an award. Businesswoman of the Year. She called the winner's name, a woman in her 30s who had built a tech startup from nothing, who had faced rejection, doubt, failure, and who had kept going anyway. The woman walked onto the stage, took the award, hugged Sloane. "You're the reason I didn't quit," the woman whispered. Sloane smiled. "No," she said. "You're the reason you didn't quit. I just reminded you that you could." 15 years after the betrayal, Sloane sat in her office. The twins were in high school now, applying to colleges, thinking about the future. Her business was still thriving, still growing, still helping people. She looked out the window, at the Seattle skyline, at the rain, and she thought about the woman she used to be, the woman who made herself small, the woman who hid her power, the woman who believed love meant sacrifice. That woman was gone. And the woman who replaced her had built something that mattered, not for revenge, not for validation, but because she refused to let someone else's choices define her. She had taken the broken pieces of her life and built something new, something stronger, something hers. And that was the real victory. Not the business, not the money, not the recognition, but the knowledge that she had survived, that she had rebuilt, that she had refused to quit. Sloane's phone buzzed. A message from her daughter. Got accepted to UW. Can't wait to tell you everything when I get home. Sloane smiled. She typed back. So proud of you. Let's celebrate tonight. She set the phone down, and for the first time in 15 years, she thought about Marcus. Not with anger, not with sadness, just with gratitude. Because his betrayal had forced her to become the woman she was always meant to be. And that woman, she was unstoppable. So here's 2 questions I want you to think about. Not just for Sloane, but for yourself. When everything falls apart, what do you build next? What did you learn from Sloane's story? Drop your answer in the comments, because your story isn't over, and neither is mine. We're building something here, a collection of people who appreciate good stories like this. Every subscription moves us closer to 1,000 subscribers. Your name on that subscriber list matters. Will you be on it when we hit the goal? Thanks for watching and see you in the next video.